Thank you very much, Chris. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and you're very welcome to this meeting of the full Licensing Committee, Feb 4th to 2021. Before we commence the meeting, I would like to ask Jill Hollyoak, our clerk, if she will take us through housekeeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting of the Licensing Committee is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. In order to ensure the meeting is managed effectively, please could everyone present follow these ground rules for speaking. Only speak when invited to by the Chair. Always turn on your video function when invited to speak. Please state your name before you speak if you have not been introduced by name. Some people may need to dial into the meeting and will therefore not have the benefit of the visual. Mute your microphone when you are not talking. If you would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. The messaging bar should not be used unless you are raising a point of order.
Thank you, Chair. It's Councillor Bagwell here. I'm the Councillor for Hamworthy Ward and I'm the Vice Chair of Licensing. It's nice to see you all.
Thank you, Julie. You're very welcome this morning. Councillor Sarah Anderson.
Good morning. My name is Councillor Sarah Anderson and I represent Moordown Ward.
Thank you, Sarah. Councillor David Brown.
Good morning, Councillor David Brown here. I'm a ward representative for the Bearwood and Merley Ward in North Poole.
Thank you, David. Councillor Richard Burton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Richard Burton. I'm also from Bearwood and Merley.
Indeed. Thank you, Richard. Councillor Norman Decent.
Good morning, Councillor Norman Decent, and my ward is Kinson and West Howe.
Thank you, Norman. Councillor Brian Dion.
Yes, I'm Councillor Brian Dion. I'm Penhill.
Thank you, Brian. And Councillor Dwayne Farr. Good morning to you, Dwayne.
Good morning, Judy. I'm Councillor Dwayne Farr. Ward is Kinson. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have with us today Councillor Anne Filer, who is substituting. So, Councillor Anne Filer, please.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Filer and I represent Eastcliff and Springbourne in Bournemouth.
Thank you very much. And we have Councillor Andy Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Andy Hadley for Poole Town.
Thank you, Andy. And Councillor Toby Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Toby Johnson, Ward Member for Alderney and Bourne Valley Ward. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. And Councillor David Kelsey.
Yeah, morning, Chair. It's Councillor David Kelsey and I'm from Eastcliff and Springbourne Ward.
Thank you, David. And last but by no means least, Councillor Lawrence Williams.
Hello, yes, Lawrence Williams, and I represent Littledown and Iford in Bournemouth.
Thank you, members. And now our officers, who without the meeting we could not continue. And firstly, Nananka Randle.
Good morning. Yes, Nananka Randle here. I'm Licensing Manager for BCP Council.
Thank you, Nananka. Linda Cole.
Good morning. It's Linda Cole, the Legal Advisor for the meeting today.
Thank you, Linda. And Jill Hollyoak.
Jill Hollyoak, Democratic Services. I'm clerking today.
Thank you very much. And we also have with us today, ladies and gentlemen, by invitation of the committee, members from the taxi and private hire trader who are here to give forward submissions with regard to agenda item 6. So I will raise your names, and if you'd like to tell us who you're representing, thank you. I'll start alphabetically. So we've got Mr. Chris Culleton.
In Democratic Services, unfortunately, Mr. Culleton hasn't rejoined the call as yet. yet, we will try and get him back on, hopefully in time for the public issues.
For the purposes of public record, Mr. Chris Culleton is a trade representative and he's the director of United Taxis. So we'll go on to Mr. Kevin Diffey, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Good morning. I represent PRC Streamline Taxis. I'm one of the directors of the company.
Thank you. Mr. Diffey, you're very welcome here this morning. Mr. David Lane.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm David Lane in Poole Taxi Association.
And likewise, you are very welcome here this morning. And Mr. Paul Sondheim.
Hello there.
Hello, Mr. Sondheim. If you'd like to just introduce yourself and tell us who you're representing this morning. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Mr. Paul Sondheim and I'm representing the Bournemouth taxis. I'm also a member of the BSTA, which is the Bournemouth Station Taxi Association.
Okay, I'll just add that extra rep there. So Bournemouth taxis as well. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sondheim. So I'm just checking, is there anybody who's with us in the room who hasn't been introduced? If you are, stick your hand up or say something. No, we have everybody, right? Thank you very much. So we'll go back now to the main agenda start. And firstly, we start with apologies. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies have been received from Councillor Dove, Councillor Farquhar and Councillor Flagg.
Thank you very much. And in turn, we have substitute members. Jill, thank you.
Councillor Anne Filer is here for Councillor Dove today.
And again, my deep thanks to you, Councillor Filer, for lending your expertise and time to this quite meaty meeting this morning. We're most grateful. So on to item 3, declarations of interest. Now, declarations of interest are as on the flow chart at page 2 on the agenda. I'm not going to ask people individually, but I will ask, are there any declarations of interest? If there are, or you have a question they feel that there might be, please indicate by the hand on the screen. If not, I will take it as read that there are no declarations. I'll give it a moment. This is for members. I can see no one indicating, so I have no declarations of interest. So Jill, for the purposes of the minutes, there are no declarations of interest. Moving on then to item 4, confirmation of minutes. We're asking, the committee is asked to confirm that we have an accurate record of the minutes pertaining to the Licensing Committee of December 2020 and the 2 licensing subcommittees held on the 11th of November and the 14th of December. Are there any issues with...
I need Cameron down here to sign into his Microsoft Teams account.
Mr. Cullen, we're with you. Could you just mute? You're very welcome, Mr. Cullen.
Sorry, two seconds. We're having an IT meltdown here. Hang on a minute.
Okay, if you could just pop your mic on mute while you sort yourself out, I'd appreciate that. Okay, right, Mr. Cullen's got some technical issues there. So going back, I'll just iterate that, members. We've got the Licensing Committee meeting held on the 10th of December. We've got the Licensing Sub held on the 11th of November and 14th of December. Are there any issues which anybody would like to raise with any issues with regard to minutes? If there are, please indicate by the hand on the screen. If not, we'll take those as read. Okay, thank you, members. So we will take those as read. So moving on to public issues. I think, Mr. Culleton, can you hear me?
Yeah, I certainly can, yeah.
Okay, why is your mic muted, but I can hear you?
No, I'm unmuted.
Right, okay. Mr. Culleton, unfortunately, you weren't able to join us right at the beginning,
No.
so we missed the opportunity to welcome you. You're very welcome. I'm the chairman, Councillor Mrs. Judy Butt, and my vice chair is Councillor Mrs. Julie Bagwell. So ourselves and the committee welcome you to this meeting. Would you like to just give your name and introduce yourself, because this is recorded and the public may indeed be listening, just to know that you are with us, and to tell us your name.
Yeah, it's Chris Culleton, Director of United Taxis.
Right, thank you very much. So if you'd like to mute your mic, we'll go back to the substantive of the meeting and I'll explain as I go along what the remit's going to be now.
Okay, thanks very much. Apologies for being late, everybody.
Don't worry, these technical matters aren't easy. Thank you.
Camera is on. Can you see the video?
Yes, we can see you, just to mute your mic.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, a very warm welcome to Mr. Culleton. The committee has received 4 public statements in relation to agenda item 6, taxi and private hire policies. And they are from Mr. Chris Culleton, Mr. Kevin Diffey, Mr. David Lane and Mr. Paul Sondheim. We have all understood who they are representing. So, having read each submission several times, some are actually longer than the time I allotted. But given the importance of the taxi trade being able this morning to make their statements unencumbered by time, I'll allow the full time required for each submission to be read in the public domain. So, gentlemen, take your time and read your submissions clearly so everybody can hear what you'd like us to consider this morning. In addition, there were two petitions received from Mr. David, two petitions received, one from Mr. David Lane and one from Mr. Paul Sondheim. And the two petitions were actually submitted last October and November 2020 and have formed part of the full consultation process, and they have been considered in full within that consultation as appropriate. The public statements and petitions have also been circulated to all committee members in advance of the meeting and have also been published on the council's website. Can I just check with members that you have seen these? They were in your public pack. If anybody is omitting them or doesn't have them or not had sight of them, please indicate by showing hand on the screen. Thank you, members, and thank you, Joe, for ensuring that everybody has them and looking after our administration for us. So that said, I'd like now to invite each of the four gents representing the trade to read out your statements, and I will start in alphabetical order. So just so you can prepare, that'll be Mr. Culleton first, Mr. Kevin Diffey second, Mr. David Lane third, and Mr. Paul Sondheim fourth. So when you are ready, Mr. Culleton, in your own time, if you'd like to read your submission, and then we'll go on to the next gentleman. Thank you.
Okay, everybody hear me loud and clear. I've kept my statement fairly short and sweet because I don't really want to repeat the important issues that everybody's going to bring up. So I'll just go through my three now, yeah?
Thank you, Mr. Culleton. Yes, if you'd like to read your submission.
So I've got three items I wish to bring up for today's meeting. Item one is I would urge the licensing committee to rethink their stance on dash cams. These cameras go a long way to safeguard not only the welfare of the driver, but also members of the public. Dash cams in the past have managed to protect drivers from theft, physical violence, all of which they do endure regularly. It has also helped to protect passengers also. It helps with any subsequent police involvement as well. Dash cams are relatively inexpensive and a lot more affordable than the CCTV that the council recommends, as no one will take on this type of CCTV due to the huge cost incurred, especially after a year with with no income. If it's data protection you're worried about, then bring in some rules on dash cam footage, but please do not just dismiss their use.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Culleton, and that has been noted. Thank you. So, Mr. Kevin Diffey, if you'd like to make your submission now, please.
I've got two more items.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. Is this within the... Oh, yes, you do. You have deregulation and you also have provision of MOT testing. I'm so sorry I cut you short, Mr. Culleton. Please continue.
Okay. They're only short statements because I know that deregulation is a big issue. On the deregulation, surely if we have two boroughs regulated and one deregulated, then it makes sense to regulate all three, especially after looking at the results of the unmet demand survey, which I know that my colleagues are going to go into, with a little bit more detail.
Thank you.
Item three, there must be provision for MOT testing centres in all three boroughs. To have just one in Bournemouth will make it so much harder to book an MOT slot. Again, this makes sense to have an MOT centre or centres in each borough.
Thank you very much. That's actually a very good point. Thank you for raising that. So thank you, Mr. Culleton, for taking the time to be with us today and to make your submission. So I'll now move on to Mr. Kevin Diffey. In your own time, Mr. Diffey.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Diffey. When you're ready, if you'd like to read your submission, thank you.
Thank you very much. I have tailed some of my original draft, so it's not word for word as you've got it in front of you, but the meaning is the same.
That's absolutely fine. Whatever you like. Please continue. That's fine.
Chair, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today. I hope that you've all read my letter, but I was disappointed not to receive any response to the questions I put in it. However, I've always prided myself on having sought pragmatic solutions to any problems and helped the licensing authority to implement changes in a way that were acceptable to both the council and the taxi trade. We've assumed that the committee is trying to improve our service in the area, but not made clear how this will be achieved by the proposed changes. At the meeting when deregulation was suggested, along with issuing 15 extra wheelchair vehicle plates in Poole and Bournemouth, the only issues I heard raised were firstly, one lady having a problem booking a wheelchair taxi, and the other, the idea that we're profiteering from trading in taxi licenses. At no point at this meeting were there any, were we able to respond, and the actual meeting itself was accepted with little discussion in all of about 3 minutes. With regard to the booking of wheelchair taxis, the time of day is critical. Taxi companies are very busy at school travelling times, and almost all the wheelchair cars have contracts. Creating more wheelchair taxis who will be sitting on the rank will not solve this problem because they are mostly independent and don't take bookings. The vast majority of wheelchair journeys are done by private hire vehicles.
Mr. Diffey, I'm sorry to disturb your flow, but you don't have your video on, and we do need to see you because you're just a voice to the public. Your video isn't on.
I can see him, Chairman.
I can see him also.
I can now see you. You just appeared. Okay, Mr. Diffey, please continue. You went on for a while. Thank you, Councillor Filer. Bless you. Thank you, Mr. Diffey. I'm so sorry to disturb your flow. If you'd like to read that paragraph again, you're welcome.
Okay, with regard to booking wheelchair taxis, the time of day is critical. Taxi companies are very busy at school travelling times, and almost all the wheelchair cars have contracts. Creating more wheelchair taxis who will sit on the rank will not solve the problem because they are mostly independent and do not take bookings. The vast majority of wheelchair journeys are done by private hire vehicles. The idea that fortunes are made dealing in taxi licenses is a mistake. The huge figures I've heard bandied about include the actual vehicle and the membership of a taxi company. Last week, we heard a lady on the radio celebrating having won £21,000. You can imagine the emotions of over 200 taxi drivers who will lose a similar amount because of the council decision. Purchasing a license plate is quite normal, and although prices rise and fall, normally form part of a driver's pension arrangements. The proposed changes will create a new market for saloon taxi plates, favouring all the taxis in Christchurch as opposed to Poole and Bournemouth. When I first bought a taxi plate in Poole, the licensing officer shook my hand and welcomed me to the trade. I was very surprised, having been a private hire driver for about 2 years before, but he explained that having made a financial commitment, I was more likely to be providing a better service to my customers. Why do we have regulation? The answer is to control the number of vehicles who are able to use the ranks to reduce congestion and maintain standards. The BCP area is the 6th most congested town in the country. This proposal would make the situation worse by increasing the number of vehicles on the road. The result of deregulation can be seen in Christchurch. This zone has far too many taxis for its needs, and most of them work as private hire vehicles in both Bournemouth and Poole, and in one case, Wimborne. Taxis are able to work from the ranks, and it's the only advantage they have over private hires. If more cars are taxis, the result would lead to a poorer service levels outside the town centres, as taxis tend to come into the towns, leaving passengers in the suburbs to wait longer, and a massive congestion in the town. As taxis are expected to drive from one rank to another, if the one they're at is full, they will be caused to drive around the town, cause even more air pollution and congestion. The extra 15 wheelchair cars, if taken up, will probably be done by existing PH drivers, who will probably leave the companies they work for because they could not afford to pay for the company subs whilst purchasing an expensive wheelchair car. They will operate wholly off the ranks, and very few wheelchair journeys originate. Many passengers will often choose to get in a saloon car in preference if they're given the choice and not in a wheelchair vehicle. We recognise that improvements have to be made, and the current guidance on best practice, which was originally written, I believe, back in Tony Blair's day and hasn't been updated since that time, has been tried all across the country, and many councils have now been forced to re-regulate because of the disruption it caused in the town and city centres. For example, Milton Keynes and Guildford. This decision will impact on the travelling public and the livelihoods of many taxi and private hire companies. We're horrified at the proposals and frankly scared at the effects that will have on our companies. The only opportunity we've had to discuss the solution was to take part in this consultation, which has unfortunately been curtailed due to COVID. There's been no opportunity for the taxi trade to have any discussion with the licensing committee as we would normally do. We'd need to be able to respond to and ask questions of each other in order to avoid potential problems from the proposals as they stand. We would need to have the opportunity to learn from each other so we could find a better solution. In this exceedingly difficult time with the taxi trade on its knees due to the reduction in travel, we need help to recover and plan a way forward together, not the rather adversarial situation we find ourselves in currently. It doesn't need to be like that. We've been successfully running taxi services in Poole and Bournemouth and have had praise for our excellent service. We share the aims of further improvement, but this could be put at risk. Other councils have taken steps to protect their taxis as they recognise they will be needed when things get back to normal. We need nurturing, not penalising. The taxi trade would like to suggest that the policy being discussed is passed, with the exception of Section 16, to allow vital in-depth based discussion on the section between all parties. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diffey. So we now move to Mr. David Lane. Mr. Lane, you're ready if you'd like to read your submission.
Thank you, Chairman. Madam Chair and councillors, thank you for this opportunity to make representation to you concerning the proposed new policies for the regulation of our trade. I would like to comment on two areas, namely the unmet needs survey, stroke deregulation, and the age of vehicles. Firstly, the results of the unmet needs survey, conducted on behalf of BCP Council by LVSA during February of last year, concluded that there was no evidence of any unmet demand and recommended that there is no need to increase the number of hackney carriages at the present time to meet the needs of the general public. It went on to state that if a limit to the number of hackney carriages in Christchurch were to be considered, such a limit could be justified on the basis of no significant unmet demand in Christchurch. This report has not been discussed with representatives of our trade, but the options available to the committee were included in the proposed vehicle policy at paragraph 16 without any recommendation. In view of this, you agreed at your last meeting to ignore the report's recommendations and introduce radical changes to the makeup of the hackney carriage fleet in Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. In our view, this decision, made without the benefit of any consultation, will have many unintended consequences for most users and providers of taxi services throughout the BCP area. In view of this, we request you to reconsider the decision you made at your last meeting and remove the paragraph from the policy and replace it with a commitment to enter meaningful and preferably face-to-face consultation with all interested parties. It is also fair to say that such a decision would enable the consultation to take place when the effects of the pandemic on the fleet are clear. We noticed that the Working Party met on the 14th of January to consider the replies to the consultation and are disappointed to see that the move to a hackney carriage fleet of unlimited size and eventually comprising only wheelchair accessible vehicles is still included in the vehicle policy. We are still hopeful that you will today agree to our request to remove this from the policy and discuss it separately. Nonetheless, we would like to point out that should you agree to adopt it as currently proposed, that customers would eventually be forced to travel in a wheelchair accessible vehicle whenever they wish to use a taxi. Many individuals find it difficult to do so due to the height of the vehicle, and many others, for differing reasons, do not wish to travel in van-type vehicles. A fleet of mixed vehicle types enables the differing demands of individual customers to be met. It is also clear that the vast majority of requests for WAVs are made in advance and fulfilled by PHV operators, so there is no need for a total WAV taxi fleet. We do not believe there is any evidence to support the proposed issue of 15 new vehicle licences in both Bournemouth and Poole for each of the next 5 years, and are of the view that the only result would simply be over-provision. The deregulation of taxi numbers also causes problems with over-demand for rank spaces, resulting in the drivers seeking work as PHVs away from their zone. Such behaviour has resulted in many authorities re-regulating their fleet. Although we would obviously prefer the status quo to be maintained, we believe that there are ways that could be explored and incorporated within the change should you decide to continue with deregulation, to avoid introducing these difficulties. It is to enable these to be pursued that we again suggest the removal of this paragraph from the policy documents and replace it with a commitment to enter into consultation once the situation allows. In any event, we would implore you to, in the absence of any other support given to our trade by BCP Council, unlike many other authorities as publicised in the Private Hire and Taxi Monthly magazine, to at least postpone the release of any additional vehicle licences for a minimum of 12 months. To sum up, it is our view that the best way to ensure that the needs of customers are met is to have a fleet regulated in terms of size and mix, as this is the best way to ensure the viability of each vehicle. Any increase in vehicle numbers dilutes the profits available to each owner, and subsequently a reduction of standards, which is surely what we all wish to avoid. With regard to the age of licensed vehicles, I must say that there are a number of contradictory statements throughout the vehicle policy. This seems to be due, one, to an attempt to be fair to the industry over the introduction of a new livery for hackney carriages. No need to conform until vehicle changed, but required by the 31st of December 2024. And two, requiring all vehicles to conform to Euro 6 standards by the 31st of December 2023. Even though this is less than 10 years since this standard became compulsory in September 2015. A date of the 31st of August 2025 for all vehicles to be Euro 6 compliant would seem to be equitable. In view of these inconsistencies and the recent government announcement concerning diesel and petrol vehicles post-2030, we would suggest combining an absolute age of 15 years from the date of first registration with a clear requirement for all vehicles to conform with the latest emission standards, Euro 6, hybrid, full EV, etc., within 10 years of them being required by law. Such a clear policy would enable all vehicle owners to make informed decisions now and for years into the future concerning the replacement of their vehicles. It would also mean that the council would be one of the first to establish such a green policy for its licensed vehicle fleet. Thank you once again for receiving this address.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wing. Now on to Mr. Paul Sondheim.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Sondheim. When you're ready, please begin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Sondheim, and I thank you for letting me speak to you on behalf of the Bournemouth Hackney trade, which counts to date 249 cabs. It has come to my on the 14th of January 2021, where 5 licensing councillors, including the chairman, Nananka Randle, and legal officer Linda Cole, attended. I noticed from these minutes of this meeting that something had been added by the licensing to the original proposals. Page 12, number 17, Hackney Carriage Library. Namely, that the dooring insignias will clearly state the zone of each vehicle and, more importantly, can be easily replaced when the zones are removed at the next review of this policy in 2025. This statement regarding the removal of zones in 2025 is not on the original proposals. To me, the Hackney driver. They're businesses which the HMRC class as a business like any other, and most importantly, to provide for their families and dependents. On page 3 of this policy, under the heading Introduction as stated, the Licensing Committee and officers are committed to ensuring the highest standards in order to protect the public safety when administering this policy. With reference to the administration of this policy, to protect the public safety, we have stated in our petition, which you should have all seen, with facts why this is not the case, and with all 3 boroughs being the same colour of white, especially with information from recognised motoring organisations, and silver are the most visual colours, are the worst visual colours for safety, and also that they can easily be bought by unscrupulous people and used, because most manufacturers can get a white car. On page 4 of the policy, 6.2, first line, any significant amendment is one that is likely to have financial effect on every single licence holder, a meaning to the trade that they will not be able to manage the upkeep of their vehicles and to a correct standard, and causing financial hardship generally. I understand that the formation of a new council is not an everyday occurrence, and wanting to put the new identity on the boroughs is at the fore. Have not been thought through and without care to the taxi trade, almost verging on showboating, so people can have their names placed on gold letters on boards saying that is what we did for BCP, ruin the taxi trade. 15 wheelchair accessible licensed vehicles issued per year in Bournemouth and Poole, with no restrictions in Christchurch. So that means anyone can buy a vehicle that have met the BCP requirements and start work or create no work through the same amount of public using even more cabs. Recently, it has been stated that Bournemouth is the 6th worst in the whole country for congestion, and in the south is only second to Brighton. This proposal can only make the situation worse. So why waste £24,000 on a survey in January 2020 that said that there was no unmet demand across the 3 boroughs? Ignore the £24,000 survey, and then number 26, chapter 16, advice from council that a council can remove limits previously imposed at any time, and no evidence is needed of unmet demand. And that the statement of the council, I quote, this will give applicants of BCP licenses a level playing field. Please, licensing, tell me how that is a level playing field. We have all invested time and money, and some of us have gone that extra mile to try and safeguard our trade and to give the public the greatest of services. Every year for them to police, support and protect us and the public as a trade is non-existent. But really, at these times, I'd like to say, why would Bournemouth Licensing are going ahead with these policies when the country is heading into the worst financial recession since World War II?
Mr. Sondheim, you are rather deviating from your statement. That's not on my statement. So if you could just keep to your statements, please, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
That is, it was sent in. That was actually sent in.
I've got to finalise. I would like to know Bournemouth are going ahead across the country. That after the government have got COVID-19.
Yeah, sure. That's what I was. To finalise, I'd like to know why Bournemouth Licensing are going ahead with these policies when the country is heading into the worst financial recession since World War II. That is after the government have got the COVID-19 virus under control. Don't you think these policies are insensitive in normal time, let alone what the nation is going through and heading towards?
Okay, I apologise, Mr. Sondheim. That must have been lost from my. I printed it off, and I don't have that last paragraph. So my apologies. I'm happy to accept your statement there. Right, gentlemen. Thank you very much for attending today at this committee's invitation and for your informative. We are most grateful that every opportunity is given to the taxi trade to be able to raise their concerns in the public domain regarding the new BCP area taxi policies being put in train by the BCP Licensing Authority. We are required under the Local Government Structural Changes General Amendment Regulations 218 to prepare and publish these licensing policies for the new established BCP area, taxi policies being one of these requirements. Therefore, just to assure you, gentlemen, that the review is not arbitrary and it hasn't been taken lightly. It's been a necessary requirement, and we are most grateful for all the contributions made today by your good selves and also made in the consultation and thorough, and has been discussed and considered at the following. We've had a dedicated member working group who've been meeting since early last summer on a regular basis as this policy emerges, changing and adapting each time. We have had trade representation. We've discussed at the full licensing committee. We've had the formal public consultation process, which is set in law. We've received council's opinion on matters of concern raised within the consultation process with the above suite of policies. We've at every stage had officer advice and report creation for consideration as we've gone forward. And we've had chair and vice chair advisory briefings. So there has been a huge raft of work which has sat behind that. So, gentlemen, thank you for your time and your valuable contributions during the full consultation process and your submissions today. We would now ask that you leave this meeting room, but you may continue to follow our live broadcast on the BCP website. So I'll just ask for that tech to be arranged. Thank you very much, gentlemen, and from this committee, a very good morning to you, and thank you very much for coming this morning to make your submissions. Thank you.
You just left. You leave now.
Gentlemen, if you would please leave the meeting and you may join us on the BCP website.
Chair, just to confirm that the four gentlemen have now left the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Linda. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the submissions made, we have read them, we've understood them. I would ask you please to be mindful of what is considered to be within the opinion of each individual gentleman who obviously is very concerned about the situation and the actual facts and the law that we strive under. So as we go in, keep that in the back of your mind. It's a difficult call, I know. So moving on to item 6, which is taxi and private hire policies. I would now like to ask if our officer, Nananka Randle, if you would like to present this report. Thank you, Nananka.
Thank you. I'm just going to reiterate a little bit of what you said a minute ago, actually. So, you know, the purpose of this is the Local Government Structural Changes General Amendments Regulations provided the local authority with 24 months from the date of the reorganisation to prepare and publish policies for the new local government area. So these are the first taxi and private hire policy documents for BCP Council, which was first established on the 1st of April 2019. A 4-week public consultation on the draft policies, and that the link to that public consultation was sent directly to all licence holders with BCP Council. That resulted in 69 responses via the website, and the majority of these responses related to the vehicle policy, particularly regarding the age at first licence, the proposed upper age limit, the emissions, the livery of vehicles, particularly hackney carriage vehicles, and Chapter 16, which all of you've really heard today from the trade representatives as well have reiterated that. And Chapter 16 particularly relates to the quantitative restrictions on hackney carriage vehicle numbers. include or exclude suggestions and responses received, and to make final changes to the draft policies as approved and provide reasons for those decisions. Once the final policy has been agreed, it will be presented to full council for ratification. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nananka, and thank you for outlining again that structural changes order, which we are all burdened by. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think we will begin by going through each policy in turn. You will have received in Nananka's report, each item has been itemised and each change and amendment that has been put forward as advised by Council, our own legal advice and our officers, comes from number 13, which states driver policy. So if you'd like to find that in your report, we will then reverse back to the driver policy, which is the first item on the agenda, to the actual policy itself on your screens, and we will go through each section individually. So I hope that you have the driver policy on your screens, and we're going to start at section 7.4 because we're looking at the main amendments. Now, just to refresh your memory before we start, these items, which were raised very much under the consultation process, which came from members of the public, members of the taxi trade, councillors, and they sat around the following, and that was the age of the vehicles, the emissions, wheelchair accessibility, hackney carriages numbers and zones, hackney carriage livery, and hackney carriage taxi meters. So those were all the substantives. There were no other issues within the consultation process, as far as we could ascertain within the working party, that highlighted other areas that needed to be considered or looked at in more detail. So that is in fact what we did over the period of time. We looked at these in great detail to try and draw a balance between the needs of the trade, the needs of course of the public, and the requirement to protect them from harm with regard to this service, and of course the need and come into the structural changes order in time. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'll just scroll down and I take you to 7.4, and 7.4 under the driver policy, it clearly states why this was amended, and I'll take you through it. Section 7.4 has been amended to state that training can be undertaken by any approved provider of licensed driver training, rather than specify which providers within the document. This was done to allow flexibility to add and remove approved providers as necessary without the full review of the policy, so cost and time saving there, and to be able to be flexible for our drivers. And the guidance for the applicants formally to Appendix A will refer to College, but also Bournemouth and Poole College. So that was our first change. If there are any issues with regard to that, could you indicate by hand? If not, I'll move on to the next item. I'm not seeing any indication, thank you. So we're going to item 14, and this was clear instructions, which is text that has been removed. It didn't need to be in the main policy because it's primarily an operational document which will be amended during the course of the policy. And if it's within the policy, then that may again be a case of time and cost and be inconvenient for our drivers. So that was indeed changed. We move on to item 15, which is apropos to section 9.1. So if you want to scroll down to 9.1, I'm going with you. So 9.1, and that's under renewals. The heading is renewals, item 9. So this is section, number 15, section 9.1 has been amended to clarify the timings for driver renewals and how early and late applications should be submitted, because there was some difficulty there, and again that was causing administrative problems. So that has now been made quite clear. On to item 16, section 9.2 reiterates 7.14 that licensings are issued for a 3-year period. This always seemed to be unclear. Shorter periods can be considered if requested. For instance, if the driver is due to retire and only wants a licence for 1 more year before retirement, etc., or ill health. as a 3-year licence is pro rata. So, ladies and gentlemen, that has been amended as such. If there's anything that anybody wants to raise, I am keeping my hand on the my eye on the raised hand. I think it's all fairly straightforward at the moment. On to item.
Chair, sorry.
Yes, Andy. Andy. Yes, Mr. Hadley.
Yeah, just in terms of it was suggesting that people could have a shorter licence on the basis of ill health, and I find it difficult to understand how they could predict that in advance.
Well, I mean, it may be that I know I asked exactly the same question, Councillor Handley. Thank you for raising it. It may be something as arbitrary as something awful, like they have a prognosis for cancer, and they've been told that they have 2 years, and you know, they want to make the very best of those 2 years, so they decide for another year or two and work as long as they possibly can. That has arisen. So it's for those reasons, to try and provide for every area, retirement, ill health, or whatever reason they might wish just to have a 1 year. That can be allowed for individuals if they so wish it. Okay.
So I appreciate that, but I guess the corollary of that would be in many walks of life you could retire on grounds of ill health and perhaps hand your licence back in the context of this. Is that something that would be a better way to handle ill health?
Well, that was what the working party have put that forward. It makes absolute sense. It made sense to us. Officers advised, I mean, I can ask Nananka for some rationale here, or Linda, that seemed the fairest way to do it, that the decision is then with if it's unfortunate that they've got a 3-year licence and something awful happens to them, that is just that's their choice, that they chose to make a 3-year licence. We're not now going to start, you know, reimbursing people's licence because charges because they were unfortunately under ill health or that they decided to retire. So I'll ask Nananka and Linda if you'd like to come in and advise Councillor Hadley on that point. Thank you.
It was, to be honest, it was just to provide a level of flexibility to a driver if they are thinking, you know, oh, I've had enough of this, I might just do it for an extra year, but I don't want to commit to 3. So it wouldn't be that we would then offer them a 1-year license year in, year out. It would be, well, you can have a year license now and license yourself, or it would be a 3-year license again for whatever reason. It was just that extra flexibility. The guidance and the legislation does say 3-year licenses, which is the standard.
Thank you very much, Linda. That's extremely helpful.
And also, if you actually look at 9.2, it doesn't give examples. It just gives the all the policy does is allow a license of less than 3 years. It doesn't actually give the example of ill health. I mean, obviously, if there was a driver with ill health, there would be other things that the licensing team, when they're assessing whether they should have that license, will have to be taken into account as well. But I think Nananka's report has really just given it as an example, more so than I think the main thing is it's just to have a degree of flexibility so that somebody doesn't have to have in every circumstance a 3-year license.
That's great, thank you.
I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Linda. That's extremely helpful. Yes, I was iterating the rationale. What I'm trying to do with regard to the working party's work and that of the officers is to iterate the rationale behind why these proposals have been put forward. So I've an example. But thank you very much, Linda, for that. Thank you, Councillor Hadley, for that question. It was extremely helpful. So moving on to the next number, which is number 17, which is section 9.3. And 9.3 has been amended to remove the scheduling and reminder emails to remove any expectation by licensing holders which may not be met during visit. So that's was becoming rather onerous. So it's just quite clear that that's now been removed. There's an absolute clarity that that won't happen. Moving on then to number 18, which is section 10. Give you a little time to get to 10.2. And section 10 covers safeguarding. So 10.2 outlines, it's been amended to state that safeguarding training will be required on renewal of 3-year licenses and not annually, as suggested within the consultation response. 3 years was deemed to be suitable. And again, I hope that will be assistive to the taxi trade. That's 10.2. We then move on to 10.3 and 10.4. And these have been amended to include approved providers such as bespoke safeguarding training designed specifically for taxi drivers, but also they can deliver face-to-face and remote training, which during these awful COVID days was extremely helpful. And it means we have an ongoing capacity there. So it gives a flexible approach which will ensure continuity of the delivery of this essential training. Again, we're back to the structural changes order and the 2-year bar. So that was provided with regard to that instance. So moving on then to item 20. I'll give you a little time to scroll down again. I've got a hand. Councillor Bagwell.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, we are including in the training the sex trafficking in all the training as well, are we, like we did in Poole before? So I'm assuming it's
yes, thanks, Rick. Thank you
all
very
going to be the
much.
same.
Yes, thank you very much for raising that. I mean, it's good to give reassurance to the public.
Yes.
That yes, indeed, we are. Every aspect that is required under law will be involved in that training. It's a very stringent process, and it is included. Thank you for raising that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
So we go to I'm sorry, section 14.1 is the next one. Yes, I've gone section 20 and I should have gone section 14.1. Sorry, ladies and gents, if you want to scroll back, we go to 14.1 and it is driver conduct requirements. I hope everybody's misrouting. So we're looking at section 14.1 and it is driver conduct requirements. And subsection 15 as well is also involved, have been amended to reflect requirements for the use of a taximeter and GPS fare calculator within the vehicle policy section 20.3 and 20.4. So this change is stated within the vehicle policy section at 20.3 and 20.4, which is the next policy for your reference. And this was included at the suggestion of legal counsel. Linda, as legal counsel has specifically asked us to include this or suggested that we do, could I please have a comment from your good self as to the rationale? Thank you.
Yes, so, excuse me. The definition of a taximeter would not include the GPS systems that were already in use in parts of Bournemouth trade. And when it was introduced for a very good reason that the licensing committee wanted, was because it has the particular GPS meters do give a lot more control and makes it easier for routes to be tracked, drivers, you know, where they drove, where they dropped people off, picked them up, etc., etc. And we didn't want to go away from not being able to use GPS systems going forward, but we were stymied from that by about taximeter, because we couldn't bring the definition of a taximeter into the definition of a GPS system. So we got council's advice just to check how, you know, we could get round this as such, so that we could still use those types of meters. So that is what we did. So you'll see when we get to the vehicle policy in that section 20, we've also talked about you can have a taximeter or a fare calculator to do essentially the same job, but it was the view that the GPS system can also do more for passenger safety and for the licensing team. So we did get some advice on wording of how we could fit that into the policy, and we've included that wording in the vehicle policy. When we get to that, you'll see that in sections 20.
Thank you very much, Linda. That's extremely helpful. I don't see any other hands. Okay, so moving on then to section 15.2 of this. Just moving down, trying to. Oh, I'm not scrolling.
I'm sorry, Chair. Just on that point we've just covered, if I may. Do we need to actually?
Sorry, Councillor Hadley, where are you? Yes, I can just see your hand. Thank you.
Yeah. Just in terms of it mentions section 20.3 and 20.4, but given that is the vehicle policy and not this policy, I wonder whether it should state that.
to be amended there within the vehicle policy section. I've actually got it underlined. It's something that I'm going to refer to. Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
I have added that wording, Councillor Hadley. I just realised that myself.
Sorry, yes, I spoke with Nananka this morning and just asked that the vehicle policy wording be popped in there for clarity. Thank you for confirming and raising that, Councillor Hadley. That's very useful. Thank you. So going to item 15.2, and we're looking at item 7, has been updated to include reference to denim jeans and tracksuit bottoms. It actually comes out as item 5 in the actual policy. Just to confirm that's correct, Nananka, where it says drivers, item 5, must wear either a shirt, blouse, top, collared polo shorts. Skirt, denim jeans and tracksuit bottoms are not permitted.
That's correct. It is 15.2, item 5.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, with regard to the matters in there, thank you very much for your comments. They will be noted. And are we all content that we are content with that particular policy, and we move on to the next one, which is the vehicle policy, which I'll just give me a few moments just to open. And I'm sure you'll all be doing the same. Here we are, Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Policy. I hope you've all got your policies open on your screens. So again, we start at, and this refers to section 7.5 and 7.6, which I will just find. 7.5 and 7.6. So this is vehicle age and emissions. I'm going to ask also that we have further information with regard to this from Linda and from Nananka. This was something which was discussed at great length on many, many occasions in the working party, and council's opinion was taken. So I think we need to clearly understand why the working party have come to this proposal with regard to amending this particular part of the policy. So we states we have 2 changes. Section 7.5 and 7.6 have been combined into one, and the age of all vehicles must be no more than 3.5 years from the date of first registration. I think there was some misunderstanding amongst the public that only cars up to the age of 3.5 years would be allowed to be used for a taxi, which is not the case. It is they must be no more than 3.5 years old at the date of first registration. Now, there was a reasoning for this. This higher age for wheelchairs was initially suggested within the draft, but discussions at workshop agreed that we wanted to encourage quality vehicles onto the licensed fleet. And although brand new vehicles are more expensive, most are purchased second-hand and are not more expensive than their non-wheelchair counterparts. Was not amended to 4 years as suggested by council, as this would then include ex-fleet vehicles which tend to have very high mileage, again back to a public safety issue, and been well used already as licensed vehicles can only be on the road 24/7. The BCP Licensing Authority require the very best quality vehicles for all new licenses. So I will ask Nananka and Linda if they'd like to come in and make comment with regard to why the working party unanimously thought and believed that this would be the way forward. Thank you very much. I'll ask Nananka first and then Linda. Thank you, Nananka.
Thank you, Councillor Burt. I do think actually just reading that, it can be slightly misleading, and I don't know whether the committee on vehicles, it should read at first licence must be no more than 3.5 years from the date of first registration.
Yes.
So basically what we're saying is that any vehicles that we issue a licence to, their first licence, they must be no more than 3.5 years old, basically. We don't want old bangers coming onto the fleet. We're trying to get a quality fleet for our passengers. As we know, these vehicles can be on the road, a lot. They're used day in, day out, high mileage, passengers in and out. We want to try to make sure that at least when they're first issued a license with us, they're as new as possible without being too onerous. quite standard as an age, rather than allowing, like you say, the 4 years for the fleet vehicles to then kick in. And that was, I say, discussed at the workshop and felt it was good way forward. And with regard to the Euro 6 emission standard, again, that's quite a common standard across the country now. Local authorities are using that. It's been in for a few years. So any vehicle now that's 3.5 years old will be meeting that standard anyway. But it's just sort of clarifying that for the trade as well.
Yes, I'd be very happy. That's actually within your report that we do this at first license. So if we would like to agree that all vehicles, and then indicating in there, inserting in there, at first license must be no more. That makes it absolutely clear, so there's no confusion with regard to our taxi trade. I hope that's all in order. I have Councillor Hadley. You have your hand raised. Councillor Hadley, thank you.
I'm sorry, it's always me. Just the meaning of this in terms of if it's at first license and then they can relicense, then there's no upper limit on the age of the vehicles. So in terms of yes, these vehicles are being much more heavily used than a domestic vehicle, and they are come out of the same factory. So it's reasonable that the wear and tear would be significantly more. So it seems to have changed the meaning very significantly for me in terms of there is no upper age limit on the taxis here.
Linda and Nananka, if you'd like to come in, please. The case, thank you.
Yeah, if you scrolling down, because that's dealing with the new vehicles. Chapter 11 actually deals with the renewal of a license. So 11.1 actually says, from the date of this policy, no license will be issued for the renewal of any vehicle aged 15 years or over from the date of first registration. So hopefully that clarifies that aspect.
Yes, sorry, Councillor Hadley, I didn't have time to get to that, but you were ahead of the game there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Linda. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for that explanation. Those 2 points are well made. I believe that the Working Party were very happy with that, and also forms of clarity with regard to the age of the vehicle and for the safety. So if we move on to item 23.
Chairman, Linda's got her hand.
Yes, I can see your hand, Linda. Please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just right. It's just to make a comment going backwards slightly. You may have picked up in some of the consultation about electric vehicles, and the fact that the 3.5 years is the first age of our vehicle. What you've also got to remember, and what the trade can remember, if there was something outside this policy, there may be an occasion where a driver with a new vehicle, he might want to come and make a case why you would allow that vehicle to come onto the fleet. So the fact, I mean, obviously this is the policy. I mean, this is your real guidance, and it's what the expectation. But it isn't completely set in stone. No policy it's so set in stone that you can't consider something different. So if a driver came to you, and as the time goes on, when we've got a bit more provision in the towns for recharging for the electric vehicles, it could be something that we move on to, but it doesn't stop anyone going there earlier. And it also means if the only way to do that is with a slightly older car because of expense, I just read this as it came up in some of the consultation, you're not stopping that is something that can be considered at any point during the life of this policy anyway, or on an individual basis. Thank you.
That's really very, very helpful. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to concur with what Ms Coles just said. We've always had facilities for somebody to come to the board when they have exceptional circumstances for actually deviating slightly from our policy. And as Mrs Coles just said, that would be in exactly the case. If somebody came along with a 4-year-old electric car in absolutely immaculate condition, we could, if we wished to, at a board level, take that decision to allow that vehicle. But it would always be under totally exceptional circumstances. But I think the 3.5 limit is something we've had in Bournemouth for many, many, many years, and it's worked exceptionally well up to now. So quite happy to carry on with that, Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much for that confirmation. David, I know we've had discussions with regard to this. I mean, the electric vehicles, the whole full or perhaps the meeting before, electric vehicles are key, and we must have, and we do have, an electric vehicle agenda. And this is something which we're very open to bringing in. I mean, frankly, I suppose in this world of pollution, we'd love all cars to be electric, but we can't have that overnight. But as you so rightly say, and as Linda so rightly says, there is a great flexibility in this, and we will take each one as it comes forward. But there is no bar to having an electric vehicle. So thank you for that confirmation. Councillor Brown, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on that point, actually, and prompted by Councillor Kelsey saying, obviously, in Bournemouth, they've had the 3.5-year policy for some time with no problem. Just to clarify what the previous policies have been in Christchurch and Poole, just to understand for sort of drivers in those areas, or vehicles in those areas of any significance.
Linda, would you like to answer that?
Oh, I'm not on mute. Sorry. It's probably better that Nananka will have it at the tip of her tongue. I'll have to go and open a folder. So let Nananka answer that, please.
Oh, I knew you were going to do that to me.
I know you were.
Oh, good grief. I know for Christchurch, for private hire, they allow it up to 13 years old, which isn't what I would want as a licensing committee going forward. And I think Poole had a slightly higher level, but I haven't unfortunately got it at the tip of my tongue, and I'm working off a single screen, and I've already got about 20 different things open. That might explode.
I can get that information quite quickly if anybody particularly wants to know. Do you want to bear with me and carry on, and I'll come back to that?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
No, it's no problem. No, it's no problem. I'll just go and get the folder that's got the licensing things in.
I think it's just really to understand, the impact that new policy may have on sort of drivers of the vehicles, in Poole, Christchurch. So if Bournemouth's been used to that policy, then that's, a large part of the conurbation isn't affected. But yeah, I'm happy to wait for a sort of exact response.
Thank you. My apologies. Thank you, Councillor Brown, for that contribution. My computer suddenly went in. Now. Thank you. Councillor Bagwell, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just checking. One of the gentlemen said about the MOT station only being in Bournemouth. Is that actually right, or are we having centres in Poole and Christchurch as well?
Yes, so that can easily be answered. Nananka, thank you.
Yeah, so we wanted to get away from any issues with potentially independent garages not maybe maintaining the standards that we wanted. So there is a BCP Council depot in Hatchpond who are going to also undertake the advanced mechanical testing. We haven't got any at the moment, but there will be 2 centres, one in Bournemouth and one in Poole. And then obviously, if we can get somewhere in Christchurch, all the better. But we would much rather it, talking and to maintain that quality of the assessment and the independence, so that you don't get any sort of pressure from people saying, "Oh, go on, it's only a little minor thing, let it pass." We wouldn't tend to get that from BCP, garage rather than an independent so much. So that's we've got 2 at the moment. Who are able to provide the mechanical examinations for the vehicles.
That's very helpful, and I know that we do have the will to try and ascertain one in Christchurch as well, but it's fully covered.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your answer. It just clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you. So I can see no more hands with regard to the age with regard to first registration for new vehicles. So I'll move on now to number 23, which deals with section 7.13. You want to scroll down. And this is with regard to luggage. This is a small amendment, and I think something which our trade will be happy with. Section 7.13 has a technical error, that's all. And has been amended to show that the boot capacity is 370 cubic litres, not 300 as stated. So that amendment to be made. So moving on to, is there any question there? Councillor Burton.
Thank you. It's just a technical point on a technical point, I'm afraid. It says 370 cubic litres.
Yes.
Surely it should either be 370 litres or 370 cubic decimeters. Being a litre is a cubic decimeter. Cubic isn't needed.
You've totally got me there, Councillor Burton. I'm going to have to ask that whatever the measurement is, it is put in correctly and it makes sense. Nananka, can we make sure we get that absolutely spot on, please? Nananka, are you there?
Yes, sorry, again, lots of screens trying to get to the right one. I think cubic litres is how it's referred to when you're purchasing a vehicle, which is why the wording was put in there. So when you're buying a vehicle, it lists the boot space as cubic.
It could be cubic meters, 0.3 cubic meters.
Cubic meters was put in by mistake first of all, and I got you'll see in some of the consultation responses was like, cubic meter? You're kidding me? How big is your boot?
370 litres is 0.37 cubic meters. So if it's in cubic meters, 0.370 cubic meters would be fine as a unit. 370 litres would be fine as a unit. 370 decimeters cubed would be fine as a unit, but not 370 cubic litres because it's actually meaningless as a unit.
Okay, well, we'll ensure that we have that correct. Thank you very much for raising that, Councillor Burton. We want to make sure that it makes our policy makes sense with regard to descriptive purpose. Now we're on number 24, which is section 11.1. If you'd like to scroll down, might take a while coming down to this section 11.1, and it's the renewal of licence, which was the question raised by Councillor Hadley. So moving on to renewal of licence and how this will be dealt with. Section 11.1. This has been amended to remove the 10-year maximum age for non-wheelchair accessible vehicles, and now no renewal will be issued for any vehicle aged 15 years or older from first registration. So that gives that some more lifetime there for the trade. Workshop members acknowledged that vehicles are mechanically checked twice a year, but felt a maximum age limit would encourage replacement and overall improvement of licensed vehicles over time. So I hope that that is a satisfactory amendment. I can't see any hands. Thank you very much. So moving on then to 11.3, which is in the same section of renewals, and that's under item 25. Section 11.3 has been amended to clarify the timings for driver renewals and how early and late applications should be submitted. So again, that's a more of a procedural issue there for clarity. I'm happy with that. So we now move on to, do I see any hands? No, okay. That's fine. Okay, so moving on then to number 26 in chapter 16, the quantity restriction feedback and advice has subsequently been provided by council regarding the easing of these quantity restrictions in light of there being no current unmet demand. A council confirmed that the council, BCP Council, can remove limits previously imposed at any time and no evidence is needed of unmet demand. This was widely discussed at the members' workshop and no significant amendments have been suggested to this section. The current phased approach to releasing licences and giving interested parties the opportunity to apply for a hackney carriage licence within Poole and Bournemouth zones with the clear aim of total removal of limits when the policy is next reviewed in 2025. The policy will then meet best practice guidance and will remove the interference with market. All applicants for BCP Council licences a level playing field. And I would ask, please, that we again ask for comment with regard to council from Linda and any comment with regard to our senior officer as to process and fact. Thank you. So I'll look to Linda first.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as I'm sure you're all aware by in your preparation, this issue came up a lot in the consultation. So straight away we thought, let's make sure we've got our facts right before we bring the matter back to yourselves to discuss. So we did contact a very experienced licensing practitioner, taxi licensing practitioner, and asked for advice on that specific point. And he made it very clear. We are, as a council, allowed to deregulate. If it was the other way round, for example, in Christchurch, you wanted to regulate, there's a lot of case law about that, saying that you have to have a policy, you have to have evidence. In our case, we did get the report that there is unmet demand. We haven't got any unmet demand, but the fact that we've not got any unmet demand does not stop us as a council deregulating if that is the choice. The only thing he said we would have to be concerned about is just generally, what's reasonable. And he's also of the view that you're not going gung-ho and saying from the 1st of April you're deregulating. You are also doing it in a gradual process. 15 hackneys a year in both Bournemouth and Poole. The reason for the 15, it is an arbitrary figure. We haven't got evidence of why we chose 15. It was just a figure because we haven't got any evidence of unmet need, unmet demand. But again, it's just a figure that you've chosen as reasonable to gradually increase the fleet, with a nod to the wheelchair accessible vehicles, because you kept that in. So legally you are allowed to do that without a problem. I suppose my legal comment, my advice going forward, is a little bit like the comment I made about the taxi age. This is what your policy is saying that you're going to do over the next 5 years. And at the moment, I understand that the intention would be in 5 years' time to delimit completely. But now in 5 years is a long time. It's a moving policy, and it could information ahead of you and before you that you might think about. So at the moment, the plan in the draft is that you allow 15 vehicles in Poole and Bournemouth, unlimited in Christchurch, because that's always the way it can be. We can't put a regulation on Christchurch because there's no unmet demand. And if you change your mind in the life of the 5 years as a licensing committee, then that's for you to do. But you could only have what you've got in front of you at the moment as to what you decide to do today. I hope that helps.
Yes, very helpful indeed. All these policy documents are work in train, and they are flexible and can be amended as we take the journey with our tax on the shelf till 2025, when we need perhaps the next administration to have a look at it. It doesn't work like that at all. Nananka, thank you.
Yeah, basically, as Linda has said, we've referred to the best practice guidance. There's also guidance which relates to local authorities and interfering with market forces. The workshop, we discussed that quite readily. By having a quantity restriction, basically you're preventing somebody applying for a license in these areas. And that way you're stopping someone starting their own business. And we felt, or the committee certainly felt, that wasn't the role of the licensing. Therefore, we're here for standards and protect public safety. We're not here to stop somebody setting up their own business. And that's one of the reasons why we started to look towards de-restricting it. To have a restriction does mean that we are obliged to undertake an unmet needs survey every 3 years if those limits are in, and that costs quite a lot of money, as you can see from the comments that have been received. So there was that as well, is do we really want to continue undertaking unmet needs surveys just to maintain a limit to stop people applying for a license? so that those sort of discussions did go ahead. And as Linda Cole has said, we sought council advice, who have said that, you know, the approach that the workshop and the members' workshop sort of took was quite measured and appropriate and proportionate to what we're trying to do, is to harmonise BCP into one local authority area. And ideally, we like all of the Hackney zones to be one zone, but rather than just de-restrict it straight away dead, which we accept would have quite a devastating impact on the trade, we felt a measured approach by doing it gradually would be a fairer way of doing it. You know, in the discussions, there is waiting list in Bournemouth and Poole for these licenses. So I know people are saying it will put a pressure on the trade, but we don't stop somebody opening a pub or opening a cafe just because there's other cafes in the area. So why would we do that for this particular trade? So those are the sort of conversations that have been taking place within the workshops that I think, you know, the wider committee should be aware of. And obviously, I'm happy to answer any other questions. I think I've covered it.
Thank you very much. It was extremely helpful, Linda and Nananka, giving us the law and the government requirement behind this, and our requirements as a licensing authority and how we should be acting in this capacity. I have Councillor Hadley, and then I have Councillor Toby Johnson. Thank you, Councillor Hadley.
Yes, I'm minded to what we've just heard, but and part of this is the representations we heard at the beginning of this meeting in terms of the impact of climate change. And I think Guildford, where they removed the caps and then reintroduced them because of congestion. Unfortunately, an electric car is just as congesting as another car, and if we have lots of taxis at the hotspots trying to queue for fares, that's a real problem. And I know that when, for instance, the buses in Oxford were deregulated, it created a huge congestion in that city. So I'm just interested that we're only looking at unmet demand and not at oversupply, although I appreciate why the trade would be telling us what they did earlier on.
Yeah, yes, it's semantics really, isn't it? It's difficult because we don't know whether it's going to be an oversupply until we actually get to actually doing it. But it's a point well made. Thank
you, Chair. No, just to come back on Councillor Hadley's point there, we did consider the fact that what we didn't want is a sudden glut of taxis overfilling our ranks throughout all three towns, which is why we came up with the stepped system, which is why we thought about this gradual release of the limit over the 5 years, because this isn't saying there must be 15 new taxis in each area over the next 5 years. There is the possibility for 15 if people don't think, if potential taxi drivers don't think that there will be good enough opportunity for business in those years, then we'll only get 2 or 3 applications. But the way the working party all felt is that it was a market and in terms of fairness to remove that limit, but this was the most sensible way to do it, to ensure that we didn't suddenly end up with 500 taxis on each rank over the next 5 years.
you very much, Councillor Johnson. You've frozen. Oh, you haven't finished, Gary. So you've frozen.
No, it's just in terms of the ecological side of things. We've also come up with these the new regulations on the emissions of the cars. We're looking at moving into more ecologically sound cars and better restrictions on the emissions. So hopefully, in terms of the way it goes forward, we won't end up with a greater amount of congestion on the roads, because the market forces will level out the playing field and will not end up with a greater amount of cars on the road. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. That's extremely helpful. Councillor Kelsey is also one of our leading members on the working party. Be grateful to hear from you. Thank you, Councillor Kelsey.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to say I totally agree with what Councillor Johnson's just said. Actually, he spoke virtually what I was going to say. One of the things we have to remember is we are not here to stop people opening their own businesses. If I wanted to start a taxi company tomorrow or just run my own taxi, then with the new conditions that we're putting in, I would therefore be able to do so. I did remember that one of the things they said on the deputations this morning was that if we do this, then people will leave their companies. I'm not sure if that's just them worried about losing some of their own as against other people opening up against them. We don't stop Tesco's and Sainsbury's opening up just because there's already a Waitrose or an Aldi down the road. You know, at the end of the day, it will become supply and demand. If there is enough business for all of the extra taxis, then they will survive. If there's not, then some of the taxis, unfortunately, will not carry on. We can't change the way that the world is going, and it will be a case of new taxis when they're needed. As Councillor Johnson quite rightly said, 15 people do not have to apply. Only one person might apply this year. At least that person will be able to get one. But once we've reached the limit, then we've reached the limit. And that's how we need to move forward. So I'm quite happy with the way we've got it worded, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelsey. Linda, you wanted to drop in here? Oh, you're on mute, Linda. And then I'll bring in Councillor David Brown. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Chair. Really, it's the comment I've already made. If, for example, there becomes issues that we don't know about yet, and there are particular issues on ranks and congestion in town centres, you are doing this in a stepped approach. At the moment, you're only allowing 15 in Bournemouth, 15 in Poole per year. We've got a little time to get to the 5 years, and if it became very clear that it was maybe not the right decision and something had to be corrected, you've got the opportunity to do that throughout the life of the policy. You're not allowing everyone to apply for this licence on the 1st of April, say. So we hopefully won't get to the situation that other towns, if that is true, that they have re-regulated because of congestion and problems on ranks. But you will be keeping an eye on that as we go year to year anyway, and hopefully it can be, anything will get stopped before that point anyway. And the whole transport department in BCP, that's also a job from them. Where are they going to put ranks? And it may be as the towns develop and regenerate, then there may be a space for more ranks anyway. I mean, again, that's outside of your scope in licensing committee, but that is other work that the council has to consider and does.
Yes, thank you, Linda. That was something which the working party did discuss, actually, a taxi rank review, and we do hope that that will be taken on board, because in the light of this new vehicle policy, if we're so deemed to support it today, there could be a bit of a step change. So I'm hoping that a taxi rank review would be put in train to oversee emerging policy. Councillor Brown, you're next, and you're demute. That's lovely, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously this point is one of the key points, isn't it, and with the responses to the consultation and the representations we've had this morning already. And I think I take the point of the working group and the officers about and wanting to sort of move away from that and stopping people starting their own businesses and that sort of thing. I'm not an economist, but to be honest, I think it's a little different to people wanting to open a cafe or pub or that sort of thing, because we do, to an extent, already interfere with the market forces in the taxi market, because we control the numbers and sizes of ranks, we manage the road networks, we have to deal with issues around congestion. So we are an integral interested party in terms of this market, and we do have levers which we can pull that affect this market. So we are there in the market, we are impacting on the market forces naturally as a local authority. So, but I take the point that we want to sort of move away from limit. I'm just interested, I wanted to double clarify. I think my understanding is that we'd be looking at another 15 new licences in Poole and 15 in Bournemouth per annum. Some mention was made, oh, you might only get one or two, three applications. If you only get one or two applications, there's still the next year, there's another 15 and then another 15 in each. So you've got, you know, in the second year, there's 30 on top of the number we've got at the moment in each, and 45. That just to understand exactly the way those numbers will change. And actually, if we've got any numbers on how many current Hackney carriage numbers we have in Poole and Bournemouth and Christchurch even at the moment. I understand Christchurch is obviously deregulated at the moment. Just so that I can put in context, this additional 15, you know, each Poole and Bournemouth.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Brown. Yes, I will ask Nananka to answer your question with regard to the cumulative effect of 15 licences per zone per year, but not Christchurch. Nananka, thank you.
Thank you. In Bournemouth, there are 249 hackney carriage vehicle licences, and in Poole, there's 89. And in Christchurch, I'm just going back because I've just recently done a search for this. In Christchurch, there are. Okay. I'm just trying to open a document here. Danny, sorry, my son's in with me as well.
That's okay, don't worry, Nananka.
It's always a joy, as you can imagine.
No worries.
Yeah, Christchurch, there's about 120, I believe. Again, I'd have to do a search.
Well, we could take that as an approximation.
Yeah.
On percentage, yeah. So you've got double the amount in Bournemouth that you do in Christchurch, roughly. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you happy with those figures, Councillor Brown? Approximation?
Yeah, if I can just come back on that a little. That's very interesting, actually.
Just answer your other question before I bring you back in if you wanted a supplementary. You also asked about the cumulative effect of 15 licences per zone per year. So, oh, hello, Councillor Hadley's cat. How lovely. So, meaning that if, say, only 3 licences were let in Poole, would that mean that it would be 15 the following year, or would it be 12 plus 15 the following year? So I think you were asking about the cumulative effect. It won't be, but I will look to Nananka for those figures. Thank you.
No, we would issue, release 15 per year. If they're not used their year, that's done. They don't roll over to the next year. So that's the title. That's the total for say 2021, 22. So then in 22, the number starts again at 15.
Yeah, that would fall, and that in its own self is an indication of market forces. Did you want a supplementary on something specific, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just to double check on that. So, for example, in Poole, potentially 104, but if we only had 5 applications, so we've got 94. Next year, it would be 15 on top of the 94.
Yes,
that right?
That's
right.
correct. Yeah.
Okay. Right, so it wouldn't be. It's not like a cap of 89 going up to 104, 119. It's not. No. Okay, so it's just an additional.
You've raised a very good point there, Councillor Kelsey, because I did ask Nananka in the week when first looking at the new policies that came out, the draft policy, that we do to stop that confusion, that there will be up to 15 new hackney carriage vehicles licensed released each year, rather than, we're going to do 15 whether you like it or not, we're going to enforce people to do 15, it's up to that amount. And then that covers for the flexibility of the point you've so well made with regard to also, because it's up to 15, so that covers that point. Okay.
Yeah,
you're more than welcome. You're more than welcome. Councillor Kelsey. Councillor Kelsey, do you want to come back? Your hand's still up, or was that?
It's
yes.
fine, Chairman. Nananka's answered the question that I was just going to give Councillor Brown some detail on that about the 15 car one, but I think I don't know whether he wanted to come back again or not, Chairman. I think I butted in over him.
Okay. Right. Okay. Councillor Brown, are you okay now? All good?
Yeah, that's fine. I understand those numbers, and then that's useful. So I'm a little concerned there that obviously we're looking at 15 in Poole and 15 in Bournemouth compared to the existing numbers, which are quite significantly different in Poole and Bournemouth. Poole being 89 and Bournemouth being nearly 3 times that at 249. So as a percentage, that's quite different. I don't know whether there's any sort of reasoning or justification around that. And I just, like I said before, I'm not an economist, but we are a player in this market. We do influence the market, whether we like it or not. And I think we do need to step very carefully around this. I'm glad we're not just deregulating overnight, because that could cause all sorts of significant issues. That if you suddenly deregulated overnight, a lot of new operators, new drivers could come into the market. Suddenly the ranks are full, and suddenly everybody realises, existing drivers and new drivers suddenly realise, actually, I'm not making a decent living out of this. And then suddenly you ruin the market because those new people have go off and find another job, and the existing people have had their livelihoods ruined, and then they give up, and then we haven't got enough. And so we don't want to cause massive fluctuations in the market by that sort of overnight deregulation. So I definitely agree that that's not the route we need to go in terms of an overnight deregulation, but I think we do need to tread carefully and manage this very steadily, because we do not want to sort of cause massive fluctuations in the market and difficulties for the businesses, for the drivers, and for, you know, the residents and customers and visitors to the area.
Yes, you make a very, very good point, and the point was made by the trade, who iterated with regard to deregulation. I think it was Guildford and Birmingham, and there's also another case which I've been looking at, Cornwall. Well, they just deregulated overnight. Basically, they had a meeting such as this, and from that day, it was deregulation city, and that was just one big horrible mess. We're doing a very slow bleed out, as Linda's made quite clear, as has David, Councillor Kelsey. This can be reviewed all the time. This will be under review. If we find from the taxi trade, stop, we're in terrible trouble, we've got evidence that this isn't working, then we can keep that monitored and keep that review going. And this item will be on our forward plan until such time as it is put in place as a policy. So it'll be the go-to place to make sure it's working. We won't just impose it and then just leave people to flounder. We will be there to support them along the way. I have Linda, and then I have Nananka, and then I have Councillor Hadley again. Linda, thank you.
Sorry. I suppose it was just to come back to clarify a point for you, Councillor Brown, Councillor Kelsey. We can only, our policy is licenses. We may only issue 3 if that's what's applied for, but to be out front there, it's already been mentioned, we have got waiting lists in Bournemouth and Poole, so it's very likely we may be able to fill these 15 spaces annually, because there are a number of people on the waiting list. Obviously we'll look further into that, how we're going to deal with that. So it is likely that these licenses will be taken up. The other just point I wanted to make, just more of a legal point, if we've offered 15 and then suddenly, for example, a 16th person who's on the waiting list or whatever way applies, do you refuse that 16th? Well, you may wish to, but if it's January and you would be allowing it in March, then I'm just saying that there may be a legal challenge, and there could be a legal challenge for that refusal to allow, say, that 16th. So I just wanted it to be out there so you're aware. But I mean, obviously that'll be on a case-by-case basis. We'll deal with each one individually as it comes. But the situation could come up possibly, and it's just something we would have to deal with. Thank you.
I think that yes. Having said that, though, Linda, I think that James Button was quite clear that although there could be a legal challenge, it was unlikely, but if there were, we had substantive case law behind us, reasoning that we could defend that.
Oh yeah,
that's also made quite clear.
Yeah, there's no issue at all about deregulating and having your 15. There's no concern there at all legally. It would be just going forward. Say you've had 15 apply this year, and then the 16th comes in, and you refuse that based on your policy. It's just the point that it's something that could then be challenged, and it could then go to court, and it's just something we would have to decide and deal with at the time. It's just
yeah. And as James Button said, with regard to that particular point, we have case law behind us, and we put everything in train that we should be able to defend such an application if it were made. I just want to make that clear to the committee that was the case within the council.
Yeah, I didn't read that part about that that way, but it's not a big issue. It's just something I wanted to say.
Point out to us. Thank you very much for that, Linda. That's extremely useful. I have Nananka, and then I have Councillor Hadley again. Thank you, Nananka.
Thank you. It's just to clarify, Guildford, their 2020 policy, taxi policy, does not have any restriction on taxi numbers, hackney carriage numbers. So I just wanted to clarify that for the board.
Thank you very much. That's extremely useful, Nananka. So that was perhaps some misinformation that came the way of whoever shared that with us. So now move on to Councillor Hadley. Linda, you still got your hand up. Did you want to come back in? Right, no worries. Councillor Hadley.
I also looked up Guildford and found that it had no limit, but Milton Keynes do. So Milton Keynes do have a limit, which is interesting because obviously as a new town, their road layout, they don't have the congestion that we do. But I'm just a bit concerned, and it is the point that David made really, that the rate of addition, 15 addition in Poole is 17%, and in Bournemouth is 6% of the existing. So in terms of equality of opportunity, I suppose, and part of that is what is the depth of the waiting list in the two towns. But it seems that the rate of increase we're expecting in Poole is very significantly higher than it is in Bournemouth. And whether that's reasonable or sensible, or whether we should be setting a rate that's based on the additions being more equal in terms of their impact on the taxi ranks and trade and space.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that. Again, it was we looked to Council's opinion for that, and he felt that the number, as stated, was acceptable, and that market forces in themselves will pan that out. Because remember, at the moment we are Bournemouth, Christchurch, and Poole, but and we're separate because we have our zoning, but we're moving to be one homogenous lump. And working together on this as a unit, as Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole, as a one authority. So this also moves away from those parochial borders that we're rather stuck with, that we're considering ourselves as separate entities. We need to try and work as one entity working together. So that was why Council felt that they could support a rather arbitrary number, I'll give you that, but it was a starting point. And as I said, if we find as we move out that the differences with regard to ratios are making a difference, then we can bring this back to this committee and we can rediscuss it and we can re-review it, and we can reconsider that first instance. And I think it's a case of putting something in train to see how things go, and then to take it from there, because we are within this structural changes order requirement and government requirements are strictured and we need to move forward. So thank you very much for raising that, Annie. That's an extremely salient point. Linda, I have you, and then I'll move on to the next point after this. Is it a point of fact or?
It's just to clarify really what Councillor Hadley was saying. So as Hackney carriages will continue to have to work in. So while you've got this interim situation where you're releasing licenses each year, they still will work within their zone. But the plan would be going forward, when you have complete deregulation, if you get that far, we would then have to create one Hackney carriage zone for the whole of the BCP area, and then all of the Hackney carriages in all three separate towns now, as their license will then have their license will then be for the BCP Hackney carriage zone. So this interim measure, there are still those restraints on them currently, but the idea is going forward that will have to be removed.
Thank you.
If that assists, or was that confused?
No, thank you. I think we've all understood that. I think through the discussions we've taken that as read. Okay, Councillor Brown, I'll hear you and then I'll move on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come back a little bit and follow on from what Councillor Hadley had said there. Obviously, you sought Council's opinion on this, and 15 is viewed as a reasonable number to use for each area. Does it have to be a whole number, or could it be a percentage of the existing number of licences? You know, could you say plus 10% in each zone each year, based on how many there are at the start of the year? We allow another 10% of licences rounded. You know, that currently that would be what, roughly 9 in Poole and 25 in Bournemouth. You know, similar sort of number overall, but does it have to be a whole number, or can it be a percentage? I don't know if you've got opinion on that.
Well, it wasn't so much opinion, Councillor Brown. It was under deep discussion. You know, this figure has to start somewhere, and it, you know, the word arbitrary can be used, and indeed Mr. Button did use the word in inverted commas, but an arbitrary number has to start from somewhere. And using ratios could be just as arbitrary, because we don't know with regard to the take up on ratio either. So I think, as Linda and Nananka have iterated before, we need to have a starting point. And if we do start with this 15 and we so agree and take it forward, if we're finding there are huge anomalies between this provision and market forces are showing us and indicating this to us, then we bring this back to this committee. As I said, it stays on the forward plan, and then we can have an opportunity there to have another option. But we are time strained at the minute. We need to have something in place. So it's an extremely good point, David, and I think it's something that we take forward on our forward plan, and we're coming to that for item 7. So remind me to remind me, yes, that we'll take that forward on that point. Thank you very much. Okay, so having covered number 26, which was chapter 16, we then move on to 16.3, which iterates the outcome of that particular part of the report. And again, it says there'll be up to 15 new hackney carriage vehicle licenses. So that gives an indication that if we don't have them all taken up, that's fine. If we do, that is also fine. And 16.6 has been amended to state that all restrictions on the by the next policy review, which is May 2025. So it gives a huge amount of time for our taxi trade to put all that in train. And unlike some of the other authorities, Cornwall and Birmingham, who just did a overnight start, we hope that we can have a slow bleed in and this will work well for everybody. So now we go on to section 17, and this relates to the livery. And the proposal for all new vehicles to be white with a blue stripe is maintained, being mindful of consultation responses regarding possible confusion with identifying which zone the vehicle is from. This has been addressed within the council advice. That's insignias will clearly state the zone of each vehicle and will have their own particular identity for the period until we deregulate on zoning, if that's the way we intend to go, and can easily be replaced when zones are removed, if that is the way in which we intend to go, at the next review of the policy in 2025. So that covers that particular issue with regard to livery. Not seeing any hands. Going on to 17.4, which is number 30. 17.4 is has been amended to allow any an additional year for existing licensed vehicles to meet the livery standards. We felt that livery standards was very difficult for the taxi trade. It was something that they told us in their consultation they had some difficulty with, and could we assist in any way? And we felt giving the working party were unanimous in thinking that giving an extra year allowed that extra time for them to sort those identifications out, those stickers out, or stickles or decals, whatever you call them, to meet the livery standards. So that explains 17.4. So we now go on to number 31, which is, I've got Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown, thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just unmuting there. Yeah, just a quick comment on the livery here. Obviously, there was a fair amount of involvement in the consultation about views on livery and that sort of thing, and some of the comments we've had this morning. And I think there were comments this morning, weren't there, about the colours and the safety and that sort of thing. Could I just ask what sort of colour options were looked at? You know, is there any views? Is it the views of our sort of transport officers around the appropriateness of the colour and the safety of those vehicle colours?
Well, I can answer in the first instance, and then I will look to Nananka and Linda. But the working party felt that what we wanted to do is we were very mindful of cost, because cost had been a matter which had been indicated clearly throughout the consultation. And white is a very effective colour, and it's also one of the very, very cheap options. To get a car sprayed white would not be an expensive issue. And also white ensures that the vehicle is kept clean. And for our members of the public who've come across very, very dirty taxis, there are some exemplars, but there are some extremely dirty ones out there. And it would be able to set a standard that if you have a white vehicle, you will need to keep it clean in the public face. So those were 2 points. And also it's a clean sweep. We didn't want to go back to yellow because we felt that yellow was already in train in Bournemouth, and we didn't want that feeling that Bournemouth were running the issue and starting from a Bournemouth-based matter. So we wanted to start from the get-go. And looking around, white and blue also fits in with our BCP corporate colours. So those were really the reasons which all seemed to dovetail into why we would do it. and with the decals which indicate the zones, we felt it was fair. I hope that helps. If you've got anything to add, Nananka, please do so.
No, other than that, this was quite extensively discussed with the trade workshops, and actually the trade came up with the white at the trade workshops. They suggested white as a colour. You know, they wanted a colour that you could purchase a vehicle without having to get it resprayed. You know, just spent a lot of money on a new vehicle and suddenly you have to get it resprayed. And we were talking about, you know, various colours, thinking corporately, you know, blue, but then you've got all the different shades of blue, and we didn't want to have lots of shades of different vehicles, you know, running around. So, you know, white is one of those colours that's doesn't come in various sort of shades. So that was why that was chosen. I haven't heard the safety thing. Actually, when you look on the AA information on safety vehicles, actually black is the worst colour for vehicle visibility and accidents. But I'm sure I could look up lots of articles and find something that would support white and silver not being safe or being actually quite safe, depending on sort of the time of day that they're being driven. So, you know, that wasn't something that we considered per se. We were thinking more in terms of the practicality for the trade in purchasing these vehicles, and then obviously making them the corporate looking.
That's really helpful in that addition. We certainly did give it great consideration, David, and I think you will agree that they are good reasons, and they're reasons to assist our trade and certainly not to hinder them, but also to provide a good service for our public who will be using the vehicles. So moving to, I don't know if I've got a misnumbering here. It might just be me. I might have done it by accident. But under 18 Hackney carriage roof signs, it stayed at 17.1 to 17.3. It did? Oh, good. Well, that just needs amending to 18.1 to 18.3. That was all. Thank you. I knew you'd noticed that as well, David. Thank you for that. So moving on then to, we've got section 20.1 now is our next one, which is under 31. So I'll just allow you a bit of time to scroll down. And this section relates to the specifications of devices used to calculate fares based on distance and time. Members acknowledge advances in technology, that's the working party members, and the safeguarding benefits of GPS type systems which allow vehicle routes to be logged and tracked. And we would wish to allow their continued use if approved, but it is the approval matter that I'm going to ask Linda to explain. As such, the wording of 20.1 to 20.4 has been amended to reflect the suggestion becomes relevant. So Linda, could you take us through that, please? Thank you.
Of course, Chair. So I already explained why and how we were able to get around the strict definition of taximeter by allowing to have either the taximeter or the fare calculator. So that's how we're allowed to have that in our policy. The bit about the approve, that's very important for you as a committee, because at the moment the only approved device that can be used is, I believe, called iCaddy. No. But iCaddy was approved historically by the Bournemouth Licensing, too much Christchurch in my head. Bournemouth Licensing Committee, and it was iCaddy that was approved as the GPS system. So the idea is not to curtail as technology moves on and other systems come on the market, but any system that is going to be used within any of the vehicles will have to be a system that's already approved by the licensing committee. So in the case of iCaddy, it was an operator that brought that suggestion to the licensing committee at the time. The licensing team obviously scrupulously looked through all the functions to work out whether we're not sure about this, yes, no, because it was obviously a brand new sort of thing back then. But these systems have continued to develop, and explained to the committee at the time of the benefits for it. And to be fair, it was all about sort of safeguarding and passengers and issues, complaints about fares and journeys and routes took, and it really seemed to answer a lot of complaints that passengers were coming up with, and it obviously has that that overarching safety factor. So yeah, please don't be alarmed. They can't just go and put any device into their car. Any fare calculator that would have to be brought before you as a committee, and you will be able to go into as much detail with the operator that might be asking, or the driver that might be wanting to put that in the car, and that will be a matter for you to either agree or not agree to have that particular fare calculator used in the cars.
Really helpful, thank you. Councillor Kelsey, did you want to raise an issue here? Do you have a question or clarification? Or
just a quickie, Chairman. Thank you. I don't really need to say much. Linda Cole said exactly what I was going to say. We did look at it very, very carefully when it came to Bournemouth, and it took us quite a lot of work checking it out, getting everything correct on it to make sure it was right. Of date, Hackney carriage regulations are, and it really is about time that somebody took it and did a root and branch review and actually brought it in, because nowadays we really need to rely on GPS much more than we ever have before. So I'm quite happy that we've got that in, and thank you, Linda, for getting that clarification on that, because I think that was really important to do, to make sure that everyone is aware we are trying to modernise as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right, to using technology wisely. Thank you very much, David. That was extremely helpful. Nananka, I don't know if you wanted to add to anything that was said. I think it's been covered, but if there is anything you'd like to add, please feel free to do so.
Like you said, I mean, it is iCaddy, Linda, not iCaddy. I can't think of a tea caddy one around. Yes, it just allows work on a more level playing field with people like Uber, because it is sort of an app-based type thing, and passenger safety is very paramount. And from my point of view, when we contact the operator that uses the iCaddy system, they will provide me with a map, the full details of who was driving, when they were driving, the time of pickup, the time of drop off, and like I say, the complete route. So there's a lot more information available at the drop of a hat, rather than sort of trying to root out information that perhaps isn't kept by just having this sort of the small antiquated taxi meter. So I do think this does allow us to move forward into the sort of 22nd century, which was what we were into.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
it's a great benefit to the licensed taxi trade in BCP, and I'm sure this is a very good amendment and certainly assistive. So thank you for those explanations. We now move on to number 32, which is section A, Appendix A, section 2.1, and this is the list of vehicles which will be considered as executive vehicles. Has been amended following consultation comments from the taxi trade, and they are listed as below. And I think it's reference to the Chrysler and to include the Tesla, to remove Chrysler and include Tesla and additional Jaguar models, and that was something the trade had asked for, so we were able to accommodate that. So, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of the vehicle policy. I will take that we are all content. I have Councillor Burton. Thank you, Councillor Burton.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I don't know if this comes at the right point, because it's part of Appendix A. It's not mentioned in the notes here, but it's something I picked up on the consultation about the length of limousines. It's on 3.2, which comes just after the cars, because somebody picked up on the consultation about the length of limousines being set at a maximum of 3.302 metres. Now, I looked at it, and it's quite right. That is actually quite a short length. A standard car, an Audi A4, is 4.6 metres long.
Okay.
I just wonder where that.
Yeah, that obviously I'm a girly. Yeah. That is a little car. So in fact, that's my Getz. That's a small car. Obviously, that's a typo then. Can we look to amend that so it's correct, please, Linda and Nananka?
Yes. I will amend that accordingly.
Well spotted, Richard. Thank you very much indeed. So that brings us to an end to the vehicle policy. So content, I see no further indications. We'll now move on to the operator policy, which was our shortest consultative return, but equally important. So I'll just give us time to access that policy on our screens. Just find mine. Operator policy. Okay, so we have private hire operator policy and Appendix A, if I can find it, which I probably can't. It's in here somewhere. A lot of appendices in here. Appendix A, Section 1. It's administrative really, has been amended to include reference to a computer records and acknowledge at G&H that not all bookings will have a name of individuals due to automated systems increasingly being used. So that is an administrative amendment there. We then move on to number 34. And its additional information has also been included within Section 1 to clarify the records required to be kept. Again, administrative for clarity. And lastly, we move to number 35. Section 2 has been amended with the additional item requiring the publication of. Makes absolute sense and is general within all employments. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have gone through great detail. Thank you so much for your contributions with all three of these policies. It looks like we have agreement with all the tweaks we've made on the amendments, and I know they will have been noted. I think the main ones were some typographical errors, Councillor Burton's 2 points, clarification over number within the zones, and also that it's up to 15 taxis per year per zone until 2025. So with all that said, clarification clear, I now move to consider the responses. We have done so, received and approve any amendments to the draft policy documents, which we have indeed done. We will now note that we have done the consideration with regard to the feedback. We've amended the draft policies as agreed and the further amendments out of this meeting. And we recommend the final version for adoption by full council. Therefore, members, with that said, it is for members that I ask to recommend to full council to adopt Part 1 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 and put forward these taxi policies for ratification and agreement by council at the next meeting. So I'm not going to go through everybody in turn, but if you do not wish to support that, a seconder, please. Could I ask my vice chair, please, to second?
Yes, Jude, I'll second that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julie. Bless you. Thank you. So I now have a seconder in train. Thank you for that prompt, Sarah. So with that said, if there's anybody who does not so wish to support that, can they indicate? Is there anybody who would like to abstain? Okay, I have no indication. So that's unanimous then. We have unanimous agreement from the full licensing council that the three policies as amended and as stated, that's the driver policy, the vehicle policy, the operators policy, be put forward for ratification by council at its next meeting. Thank you very much, member. And the forward plan, and I would ask, please, Nananka, if you would kindly take us through the forward plan. I have yet to find it because it's on my screen. We're going to go back to the main block, ladies and gentlemen, of our public pack. And if you go to item 7, that will take you to the forward plan. I'll give you a few moments to get there.
Sorry,
indicating.
Yes, I don't know whether I missed it, but did you also approve the resolution to create the single private hire area?
Yes, if members agree to a single private hire relevant area. If I did not, then please consider that as said. Okay.
Right, it was just me.
Yeah.
You're getting a bit fatigued now.
Yes, thank you. So moving on to our forward plan, item 7. Can I ask, please, Nananka, that have I got an indication? Nananka, you're back.
Yes. Sorry, I take my hand down. So okay. Yes.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Nananka, if you'd like to take us through the forward plan, and I think that obviously one of the main things that we do need to have on the forward plan now, out of the consultation, out of all members that spoke, and I'm sure those who didn't but were supporting perhaps in their quietude, that we do need to be monitoring these new taxi policies that we're now putting forward. That is key. We said we'll do that, so we need to have something on our forward plan. So at each committee meeting, full committee meeting, we are looking to see how things are going on. So can we make sure that that happens at a periodic review, I think we could call it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, I'll add that on. So the forward, yeah. So on the forward plan, we've got obviously what we've been talking about today, the taxi and private hire policies. So these will then go to full council on, I think it's the 23rd of February. The next things that are coming up in March, we've got the harmonisation of the licensing fees for BCP Council. So at the moment we are running under 3 different fees for the taxi trade, for Gambling Act applications where they're not set by statute, where we've got pleasure boats. We've got quite a few things that we license that are currently, you know, there's a different. So we obviously want to harmonise that and bring into together one fee structure. So we've been doing quite a lot of work on that with the accountant, so that a report will be coming to committee with the proposed fees for BCP out the 4th of March committee. And then we've just finished the public consultation on the draft sex establishment policy. That consultation ended on the 1st of February, and that is due to come back to you to consider the consultation responses and confirm a final version of that policy on the 4th of March. So that's coming up. And then I believe also on the 4th of March would be the review of arrangements for subcommittees. Offences Officer. And then looking slightly further ahead into May, we've got the draft Gambling Act policy will be coming to committee ahead of, again, public consultation for that to take place throughout sort of 2021, and the aim is to get that agreed and ratified for 1st of April 2022, so that we are in line with the national scheduling for these policies. The Gambling Act, the Gambling Commission publishes guidance for these policy documents ahead of the required timing. So we'll be getting guidance shortly from the Gambling Commission to assist us in the drafting of that policy. So that's what we've got coming up.
Yes, so it's a packed programme.
Yeah.
Members, I think thank you very much, Nananka. I think with the addition of the monitoring of our new 3 taxi policies, please feel free at any time, members, to ping Jill or Nananka with anything that is important to you and you feel needs to come onto our agenda, because we're open to look at absolutely anything. We have extremely experienced officers who are able to assist us, so please feel free to do that. So we will take the forward plan as read. Just for absolute clarity, because this is so important, I would like to return, with your indulgence, to item 6, and I would just like to state, please, and propose and second again the absolute wording, so we have it absolutely straight, because I can't hear myself recorded. I believe I said this, but unless we go back and hear the recording. So I am please asking that the committee is agreeing to the creation of a single private hire relevant area, and it requires recommendation to the council to adopt the provisions of Part 1 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976. I so propose. May I have a seconder, please?
I'll second you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And I have all those in favour. If anybody is not in favour, please indicate. And any abstentions? Thank you. That was just for absolute clarity, because members were unable to hear what we said, and you know what it's like when it's virtual. It's more difficult to tune into absolutely every single word that's going on. So that's just for clarity, so that goes to council at the next meeting. There's nothing else to raise. Thank you so much. I know it's a huge piece of work for the Working Party, also a huge piece of work for all members of the committee, a lot to trawl through. I very much hope that the taxi trade will feel that we've done everything we possibly can to consider themselves, but that it is a movable feast and this is an ongoing programme. We're not just going to put this on a shelf and forget about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Indeed, I look forward to presenting this at Council with my Vice Chair's support and to take this forward. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and goodbye. Thank you.